Determining how cattle behaviors affect grazing habits is the focus of Mitch Stephenson, a Nebraska Extension range and forage specialist. By using GPS tracking technology, Mitch can determine cattle grazing habits and ultimately manage rangelands more efficiently. We spoke with Mitch to learn more about his research, but began by asking about the importance of rangelands.
So rangelands cover about 23 million acres in the state of Nebraska. Most of that's in the Sandhills region. And also in the northwestern part of the state. And these rangelands are extremely important to our beef cow industry, which is about 1.9 million beef cows in the state. It currently ranks us about fourth in the nation. And those cows spend a portion of their time on these rangelands. Some of them are year-round. So not only is it critical for our beef cattle, these rangelands also provide a wealth of ecosystem services, wildlife habitat, water infiltration, soil erosion control, carbon sequestration. These rangelands are extremely important to us as a society, not only just as a product or to produce a product in beef cattle.
One of the benefits of rangelands are the forages they provide. According to Mitch, Nebraska is unique by having highly productive rangelands in close proximity to high productive croplands. This allows producers to use the forage from rangelands during the summer and certain times of the year, and then be able to move cattle to the cropland to use corn stalks and other cropland forages. To document which forages the cattle graze the most, Mitch uses GPS tracking devices.
So I got interested in using GPS collars and tracking devices to monitor how grazing behavior influence some of the plant-animal interactions. So we know that certain behaviors in cattle indicate where they'll go to graze and where they might graze more. So we're really looking at these preferred areas and how cattle go back to those areas over and over again and may utilize those areas more than other areas of the pasture. And so we're really looking at how their behaviors change over time within a pasture as there becomes less and less forage as grazing increases on a pasture. We're also doing some research looking at how cattle utilize some invasive species. And so this is in the Panhandle where the annual invasive grass, cheatgrass, is very common and it's intermixed with a lot of our perennial grasses. And so the goal of this research is to really look and see how animal behavior can be employed to target grazing on the cheatgrass at certain times during the year, to really focus the utilization of that as a forage while also reducing the amount of that species that goes to seed. And so we're looking at that from the standpoint of, can we graze it really hard in the early spring, get off of it, and let the perennial grasses grow uninhibited without grazing. And so we're using GPS tracking to see, okay, when are cattle going to those areas with a lot of cheatgrass, and then when are they grazing on areas with mostly the perennial grasses, to see where that shifts in their selectivity.
Since this research documents which forages the cattle are selecting, it also shows how these grazing strategies influence the plant communities.
So looking at everything from continuous grazing, where cattle are placed in a pasture all summer long during the growing season, and how that influences spatial heterogeneity of plant species and structure and height, as well as production at different topographic positions across the sandhills. And also looking at that in comparison to very intensive rotational grazing strategy, as well as a moderate grazing strategy of 3 or 4 pastures. And so a lot of that research they're looking at to really see how these different grazing strategies influence some of the plant communities and how we can use these strategies, one, to improve efficiency of our beef cattle production, also looking at how it can manage for some of these more beneficial species that we want to see out there for livestock production, but also see how it affects plant communities that might have other ecosystem services for maybe wildlife species or some of these other services that are also important to have on rangelands.